Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, watch out for that secret Jesuit command watching over you. Yes, they know everything. They'll look through your computer. We know about NSA, and they can track anything. Pretty soon there'll be a camera on every corner. Privacy gone. You say anything bad about the Supreme Jesuit Command or their minions in government, it's going to be no different than if you were living right in China right now. What do you think we sold out to China years ago? We admire that, and Rome admires that. And although they have to play the democratic game, play it out, use America as its military arm, that's why Trump's building it up, right? And that's what America is. The military arm of the New World Order. Then we have London, the financial arm. Then we have the Vatican, the spiritual, occult, satanic arm. And they all work together. All worshiping, they show you with the obelisk. What do you think that thing is? I mean, I once wanted to start a company, a tour guide company, showing you all the occult symbols in all of our government buildings in Washington and all the state houses. It'd be great. Let's take a trip to Washington. And I'll show you really who runs the country. What do you think's on the top of the Capitol building? Think about that. It's all occult. It's all worshiping these gods from ancient times. What about the obelisk? There we go. So that's the Freedom Monument. It's got its real nice pond. It's pond in front of it. That is also occult. The water in front of that, the reflecting pond. Now, these obelisks tell you right off who London, Rome, and America, the United States, worship. It's a phallic symbol to Isis, the Egyptian goddess, whose husband was killed, right? And his parts, he was cut up, and she collected all the parts except for his penis. And then she made a golden obelisk, and that's what the hell it is. So why the hell would it be here? Because these three organizations, okay, look at Rome. It's in Vatican Square. It's not a country. It's a country of itself, not a part of Italy. Then we have London. There's a part of London where the obelisk is that is not a part of England or London. Then we have the Washington, D.C. It's not a part of the United States. They have their own flag, etc., etc., and we've gone over this many times. So, when we talk about this, why do people not understand it? Because of what we're talking about here. They've not only told you in the occult what they're about, with all their signs and symbols and occult signs and symbols, but they've taken over education. They've taken over what do you think these people in the ivory towers, these historians, bow down to? If anybody wrote a book like this, which contains facts, they would not be on the faculty. They would not be there. And there's freedom of information in America? Give me a break. They control it. And one of the reasons they do is, before I get to indoctrination and obedience and education, we need to do a whole remake of what the hell happened during the American Revolution and our founding fathers and who the hell they really are. Because if you don't think Rome was involved and you don't think the Jesuit general back then was basically providing the brains behind how to pit England against France, etc., in the revolutions to get Rome and the Vatican into this country under the Constitution, which now said freedom of religion. Let the beast in. Hey, there were few people here of Catholic. There's one Catholic diocese. Now, look around. But that's for another day, and I've done stories on that over and over again. Don't trust these people who write our history books. I want all my money back from my college and high school history days. We used to pay the priests, my dad used to pay to let me go to Notre Dame High School. I remember that. I want it back. Yeah, that'll be a dark day in hell. But anyway, introduction and obedience. Education is the key to Jesuitism itself. Now, here's a quote from a gentleman by the name of Niccolini, who wrote that book about the Jesuits, and he said, the most striking characteristic of Jesuit education, as we have already frequently remarked, was and still is, that almost all of the persons educated in their colleges, and that includes people who are in Georgetown University here, in the School of Foreign Service, created by Father Walsh, Edmund Walsh. All of these people educated in their colleges consider themselves in a certain way attached to the order. They have this certain Jesuit attachment. And to the end of their lives work to their utmost for its aggrandizement. In this art of binding to the society, all of their disciples makes the Jesuits really powerful and dangerous. They have people at the highest levels of our government right now. All over the place. They've been doing this. We've been tracking it ever since Kennedy. You can go back to Nixon. Go back even farther than that. Makes the Jesuits, they're powerful because these people are attached to them, especially in those countries where they're adverse to the government or to the class of citizens. We insist on this consideration, says Niccolini. You have to think about it. Now, examples of this binding or indoctrination are readily to be found in the spiritual exercises of the founder itself, Ignatius Loyola, in the Rules for Thinking with the Church. The instruction is always to be ready to obey with mind and heart, setting aside all judgment of one's own. The true spouse of Christ, or Holy Mother, our infallible and orthodox mistress, the Catholic Church, whose authority is exercised over us by the hierarchy. Another principle laid down by Loyola himself may cause the reader to gasp. Don't think they don't think this way today. That we may be altogether of the same mind and in conformity with the Church itself. If she shall have defined anything to be black, which to our eyes appear to be white, we ought in like manner to pronounce it to be black. Exactly. The total obedience required from those who accept the Constitution and swear the Jesuit oath is such that they must allow themselves to be born and ruled by divine providence, working through their superiors, exactly as if they were a corpse, which suffers itself to be born and handled in any way whatsoever, or just an old man's stick, which serves him who holds it in his hand wherever and whatever purpose he wished to use it. Okay, so such training and discipline and total submission to the order, allied to ruthless single-mindedness, have brought worldly dividends in the exercise of absolute power in this century as well as it is in the last. So this man, in his little pamphlet and book here, wrote about Abraham Lincoln in the Jesuits, and I'd like to, we've discussed this many, many times, but I'd like to look at it again from this man's point of view and see what he has to say. But he said that former Roman Catholic priest, again they're going to refer to Charles Chiniquy, who during the 1860s led almost all the Catholic population of St. Anne, Illinois, to trust in Christ alone, was a friend and confidant of Lincoln. And in his book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, he describes his last meeting with Lincoln before the assassination. The president spoke of his presentiment that God will call him through the hand of an assassin, and expressed his feelings and revealed a very deep faith. Lincoln said to him, "I see the storm coming, and I know that his hand is in it. I believe I am ready. I am nothing, but truth is everything. I know that I am right, because I know that liberty is right, for Christ teaches it, and Christ is God." Now, before I continue, you have to understand that Chiniquy was charged with rape by the Jesuits, who did not like the way he was preaching in Illinois and talking out against the church, and actually telling the people in his congregation that the church was here to destroy America. So they had to get rid of him. So they charged him with rape, a phony charge, And one of the Jesuits got his sister to say that Chiniquy raped her. Well, Chiniquy knew he was innocent, and guess who he called upon to represent him? A young lawyer named Abraham Lincoln. And we've discussed, nobody even talks about that trial. How he basically outed the Jesuits and the Bishop of Chicago for what he said about wanting to bring down America. And nobody ever talks about it. This is what is left out of all these books about Lincoln's assassination. Who really did it? That would be a key, right? So, Lincoln, he spoke of impending death, following news he had just received of the letter of Pope Pius IX to Jefferson Davis in support of the South cause in the Civil War. He knew that the publication of this letter was his death warrant. And he said, "So many plots have been made against my life," said Lincoln, "that it is a real miracle that they have all failed. When we consider that the great majority of them were in the hands of the skillful Roman Catholic murderers, evidently trained by the Jesuits. The Jesuits are so expert in those deeds of blood that Henry IV said that it is impossible to escape them, and he became their victim, though he did all that he could be done to protect himself. My escape from their hands," said Lincoln, "since the letter of the Pope to Jeff Davis has sharpened 1,000,000 daggers to pierce my breast, would be more than a miracle. But just as the Lord had no murmur from the lips of Moses when he told him that he had to die before crossing the Jordan for the sins of his people, so I hope and pray that he will hear no murmur from me when I fall for my nation's sake." President Lincoln then was assassinated in Washington on the 14th of April, 1865. Brigadier General Thomas Harris, a member of the military commission that tried and condemned the conspirators, found guilty of the crime, was convinced of the complicity of the Roman Catholic hierarchy in the assassination and its responsibility for it. How come you don't hear this? How come they allow these people to exist here if they've killed Lincoln? That's the way, that's what I'm telling you. They control everything here. They killed Kennedy and then some other presidents that we've talked about. He wrote that there was a positive evidence that the Jesuit fathers engaged in prepping young men for the priesthood away out in the village of St. Joseph in far-off Minnesota were in correspondence with their brethren in Washington City and had been informed that the plan to assassinate the president had been matured. The agents for its accomplishment had been found. The time for its execution had been set. And so sure were they of its accomplishment that they could announce it already done, 3 or 4 hours before it had been done, consummated. And that's what Brigadier General Thomas Harris said in Rome's responsibility for the assassination of Lincoln. Now, is he a conspiracy theorist too? Well, how about the Nazis and the Catholic hierarchy? Boy, we've talked a lot about that. And no one seems to understand that they're going to do the same thing here. Hitler and Himmler were greatly influenced by the Jesuits, as was Mussolini, whose father confessor was a Jesuit. Dr. J.H. Lehman points out in his book, Behind the Dictators, that the Jesuit father Stampfel wrote Mein Kampf for Hitler. The ghostwriting of Stampfel argues in Mein Kampf in favor of the indisputability of the Catholic dogmas and of the intolerant attitude of Catholic education, as well as the necessity of blind faith and of personal infallibility of the Pope. Edmund Paris, okay, and that was in Behind the Dictators. Edmund Paris relates in the Vatican Against Europe that Hitler's associate Hermann Rauschning recalls Hitler as saying that he learned most of all from the Jesuit order. So for there has been nothing more imposing, said Hitler, on earth than the structure organization of the Roman Catholic Church, and a good part of that organization I have transported to my own party. I will tell you a secret. I am founding an order. Okay, that's Hitler. Hitler was also quoted as saying of Heinrich Himmler, in Himmler I see our Ignatius Loyola. Walter Schellenberg, like Joseph Goebbels, Jesuit educated, who led the SS, the Secret Service, and was sentenced to death at Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, stated that the SS organization has been constituted by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuit order, their regulations and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius of Loyola, with a model Himmler tried to copy exactly. I'll get to what Himmler said, but listen. You know, we did a number of stories on a guy named Father Edmund Walsh, who founded the School of Foreign Service over at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and it still goes on today. And there were many facts showing that the United States, this is just one, sent Walsh to oversee the trials of Nuremberg and the judge. And his main role was to keep out any references of the Vatican, the Jesuits, and basically many of the people that should have been tried were allowed to be set free. These Nazi war high crimes and misdemeanors, all these Nazis, many of these high-level Nazis were given asylum, and through the Vatican rat lines earlier as well. They were sent to places like Argentina, Canada, some to America, and it just goes to show you that they work together. Who better to hide everything than a priest, right? Now, Himmler, whose uncle, the Jesuit Father Himmler, was the very eye and arm of Ledikowski, the general, that was the Jesuit general, according to author Edmund Paris, belonged to a family that was entirely devoted to the church. His position as Supreme Chief of the SS was to be the equivalent of the Jesuits' general, and the whole structure was a close imitation of the Catholic Church's hierarchy. The Nazi Party was brought to power through the acquiescence of the Catholic Central Party in Germany and the highest strategy of the Vatican. Instrumental in this strategy were Reich Chancellor Franz von Papen and Papal Nuncio Monsignor Pacelli, the future Pope Pius XII. Von Papen, owner of the Central Party's official paper, Germania, played a leading part in obtaining Hitler his two-thirds majority, signed the law which made Hitler head of state, and also was responsible for the enormously important Concordat with the Pope in Rome in 1933 that still stands today. The Concordat was his most remarkable achievement and the culmination of his close working with Pacelli and the Vatican. Van Papen declared, "The Third Reich is the first power in the world not only to recognize but to put in practice the lofty principles of the papacy." My God. Well, didn't we fight Nazism? So when I say they work on both sides, the Hegelian dialectic, we have Jesuits here in America who are fighting against the Nazis. We have Nazis, Jesuits who are fighting against America. They're chameleons. And they're doing the same thing today with the left and right in our country. So, did I make my point? How about this? Let's end it with, there's a book called The Memorial of the Captivity of Napoleon at St. Helena, Volume 2. Okay, the exercise of power, the apparatus of Catholic action. Let's talk a little bit about that before we close today. And in that book, it said this, a French general named Montholon gave his description of the Society of Jesus. The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery, and the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise, absolute power, universal power, power to control the world by the volition of a single man. Jesuitism is the most absolute of despotisms, and at the same time, the greatest and most enormous of abuses. You know, many Protestant watchmen see the Jesuits as just as powerful and active as ever today. You know, writing in 1965, Avro Manhattan, an authority on Roman Catholicism and politics, described them as the ecclesiastical stormtroopers of the Catholic Church, and remarked that it is most significant that in two traditionally English-speaking Protestant countries, Great Britain and the USA, they have their largest contingents. And that was a quote from Vatican Imperialism in the 20th Century, a book written on that. Now, that was in 65. We've talked about 1985. We've talked about books written as, people understand. Why do you think this argument, when you bring this up to people, they say, well, they've changed. Well, they've changed since when? 1965? 1865? 1985? 2001? No, they haven't changed. They're the same. And they occupy posts at the highest levels of influence in government, although they are not easily identified. One example, Vernon Walters, let's use this, was a roving ambassador for successive United States administration and top-level negotiator for the White House for many years. In Washington, he has steered a careful path, avoiding calls to power and concentrating on serving men at the very top. He was educated where? At Stonyhurst College and at a French Jesuit schools, and was described by former Secretary of State Alexander Haig as like a member of the clergy in terms of lifestyle. Vernon Walters' most recent assignment, going back a few years, has been ambassador to Germany, leading up to the reunification and beyond. So, you're talking about ambassadors, you're talking about people in our Congress, you're talking about the Senate, you're talking about the executive branch, the CIA, all of them. Many of these people have Jesuit ties. Another former pupil of top Jesuit schools, Stonyhurst, is leading English charismatic Charles Whitehead. In his testimony that he gives on the Full Gospel Business Men's Fellowship International Circuit, he was revealed and affirmed his Jesuit background. He's married to an Anglican and heads of the Catholic Charismatic Renewal Organization in Britain, and also for Northern Europe, for which he regularly reports to the Vatican. So there's just another example. And if you went down the line here in America of the ties of Protestantism in all different denominations, bowing down to Rome, you'll find the same thing here. Because they have basically infiltrated these Protestant organizations, so there really is no protest. Now, these activities we talked about with this man, Whitehead, especially his role as president of that chapter, have greatly influenced many Protestant leaders who have been led in an ecumenical direction by him. Appearances on television going back to 1991 point the way to his arrival on the national stage as Catholic lay leader in the charismatic church, as it emerges as a serious force under the ecumenical leadership that's been going on for years here. So we have this infiltration through education. We've taken away our history books already regarding this story, and we're left with shows like this and other piecemeal information that comes out that is always decried as anti-Catholic or basically a conspiracy theory that doesn't have any validity, because where are the facts? Well, we've given you many facts that should at least bring Jewish leaders, Protestant leaders to the table to talk about this. But you know something? They realize that if they do, right across the neck, they're done. These people have. That's it. Basically the end of their career, the end of the story, and that's why you don't hear anything about them. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal with more on the Vatican-led New World Order.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds. Welcome back to the greatest show on earth, the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here. This long-running show that I've been doing ever since, I think, about 2004, talking about the Vatican-led New World Order, all its minions, how it relates to the American government, the political scene, how it relates to most everything in your life. And the one thing I can assure you, once you mention those words, you're not going to get anywhere in the world of the media today. You're seeing what's happening in the media today with CNN moving way to the left, socialism, and their Jesuit counterparts who created socialism in the 1600s with the Paraguay experiments. How many of you knew that? So when you talk about socialism, you better bring them up. And they were the creators of it. And they benefited immensely. The slaves of Paraguay did all the work while the Jesuits made all the money. And that's what exactly will happen in America. What do you got, Bernie Sanders, a socialist? The guy's got 3 homes. He's a millionaire. Flies around in a private jet, but he wants you to get rid of your car. He wants you to get rid of everything. In fact, they're calling for the state to control all property. Not as long as it's on my watch. But I'm telling you, you can't ever understand this, what they're doing to America, unless you understand the Vatican-led New World Order. And you probably say, well, Greg, why even bring it up? Look at what Trump is doing. The greatest economy in the world. Jobs, jobs, jobs. People are working. What are you worried about? America's in the best position it's ever been. You know, isn't that what they did in Germany? Remember, they built it up to tear it down. And what they're doing now is they're getting everybody who's gung-ho America on the right together and everybody who hates America on the left together, and they're going to fight to the end. And in the end, they're going to get their own way. Yeah, because they work the Hegelian dialectic. What do you think you never get anything done in Washington? You got these Republican senators who do nothing because basically they work together with the left. Oh, they talk a big game. But look what's going on with this impeachment thing. It's all a sham. Nobody's ever going to be held accountable. And they're distracting you and getting away with basically murder. And when it gets right down to it, Nobody even cares about Rome. Nobody even cares about the Jesuits. And that's where this is where the whole ball of wax needs to be discussed. And, I was doing a series last week, and I'm going to continue it. I got through 2 parts. It's called, There's a Whole Lot of Evil in the World. Where does it come from? And how can we dissect it? And so I've started to go over some of the evil organizations, started to go over some of the evil places in the world, started to go over some of the evil rituals, and I'll get to that. But I got sidetracked the other day because I started looking back at some of my archives and notes and things that were written about them as back around 1985. And no one has heeded the message. In fact, it's got worse. Nobody even cares anymore because they think that there is a solution at hand with either the left or the right. Those who are never Trumpers think, or the socialists, they think that there is going to be a change in America. Get rid of everything. And then you have those who follow Trump who think that we have to make America strong. But neither one of these groups are going to get their way. Trust me. This is a game they play. It's a theater game. They've been practicing this for one reason, and that's the destruction of this country. And I'm not sure when it's going to happen. It could be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But I'll tell you, down the road, you're not going to see America in the shape and form it is today. Because anywhere Rome goes, and you can bet all the people that are in the power today are controlled by these people, are no friend to freedom. So I'll get back to that, the series I was doing on There's a Whole Lot of Evil in the World. But I got sidetracked yesterday and went over a pamphlet that was written in 85 by a guy by the name of Ronald Cook, and it was pretty interesting because it's gotten worse since then. And all these all these warnings that people give people in America, no one will ever break through this barrier because the media not only is bought and paid for on the left, like the right-wing journalists are talking about now, but it's bought and paid for on the right. Who do you think Rupert Murdoch is? He's a Knight of Malta. And they're playing this Hegelian dialectic to the T. And so all of these guys on the right are making millions going to the bank, talking against the left, and the left's talking against the right. Everybody's talking, but nobody brings up this subject at all because they both are in agreement who their real master is. And if any one of them said one word like I'm saying today, they'd be off the air before they could even get the second word out. And then what they're going to do is take this message and say, oh my God, it's hate speech. This guy's a conspiracy theorist. And then what they'll say, the people on the right, and you know who they are, they'll say, oh, there's no freedom of press anymore because look at what the left wing is doing to us. Well, look what the right wing is doing to people like us who want to get this out. They're doing the same damn thing because they will not deal with the major problem behind the scenes. Who's pulling these strings? And they can call me a conspiracy theorist till the cows come home, but I can sit back, rest assured that I didn't just get this on the internet. I spent 7 years in Rome, and I saw it firsthand. And boy, I went there with an open mind, a journalist. I was an open book. I thought, in fact, maybe I can get back to the church. I was born a Catholic, and what I found was complete, utter chaos, complete, utter satanic worshiping in the Vatican. All of these scandals going on with banks, people dying on the London Bridge. Remember Calvi? Cardinals joining the P2 Lodge. Nothing ever mentioned. The Pope was killed by their own people. This is an organization that is sick and evil, and everybody here that reveres the Pope is working for him because they got this information right in front of them and they won't bring it to you because this country will never, ever, ever recover if this story isn't told and people don't realize it. So I listened to Robert Cook and I read his part of his pamphlet yesterday to you to give you an idea that there are people that were trying to get this message across even back in the 80s. And then we go back to the 1900s, and I've read your book. Remember Burt McCarty's book, The Truth About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln, written in 1921, pinning the Vatican and its minions to the wall? That book, she had to change her name just to survive. That was written in 1921. And it really nailed the Vatican to the Lincoln assassination. Facts that are ignored by anybody that's done anything on the Lincoln assassination here in America. All these great historians. Then they do movies by Robert Redford, and they give you a tainted picture of really what happened. And they've done it with everything. Kennedy, they've done it with 9/11, and they'll continue to do it. But the left and the right are in agreement on those, aren't they? It's really weird. And they are in agreement that the Vatican is a revered organization. Okay, they got their pedophiles. We can let that go. Yeah, right. Let go a settlement they did in Washington, folks, that you never hear about. Just recently, about 8 years ago, and I happened to interview the law firm and the people more than anybody, and showed you how the Jesuits were pinned to a $200 million settlement because of their actions in the Jesuit mission schools genociding the Native Americans. How about that? And you still let them exist in this country. That's what's going on. Now, the Jesuits today. So I look back again, and I found Ronald Cook's pamphlet. And then I found one written by Michael De Semlyen, Semlyen. He wrote something called All Roads Lead to Rome. Okay, all roads lead to Rome. Make a song out of it, right? And he wrote this, and I wanted to paraphrase some of it to you, as well as read some paragraphs. But he was right on here with a lot of things. And, as usual, nobody heeded his message. And they are so infiltrated, the Jesuits and the Vatican, into all of our organizations, including Protestantism and this fake ecumenical movement. And boy, listen to his words here. He said, the Vigilant Christian Organization, CRIB, the Catholic Research Information Bureau, okay, sounded a strong and sober warning note. Don't be deceived, they said. The Roman Church is like a chameleon, tolerant, friendly, highly moral, they say, and authoritative in Protestant England and America. But where there is a Roman Catholic majority, she's a very different animal and no friend of freedom, always blending in with the landscape, but never quite what she seems to be. Remember H.G. Wells? I wanted to bring this up. He wrote a book once. It's called, and he said this. He said, Roman Catholicism presents many faces to the world, but everywhere it is systematic in its fight against freedom. The Jesuits, who originally implemented the Counter-Reformation by decree of the Council of Trent, are seen as continuing to do so in the present century, says Mr. De Semlyen, with increasing success. Once counselors to kings such as James II, Louis XIV, who held divine rights, the Jesuits very often masterminded the dramatic events of the history of scheming and prompting backstage. And they're counselors today, folks, to Trump, to Obama, to all of these people that rise to these high levels, are selected by them and by the powers that be to be president. He's not elected. They told us 10 years ago Trump was going to be president. Once counselors to the kings, like I said, now they are making their comeback in positions of influence among even our own institutions. Many of them have been able to come out in the open. Since in the current climate of spiritual indifference here in America, they have little to hide. However, placed in key positions in religious, broadcasting, and educational establishments, including Britain's top schools and America's top schools, even in evangelistic undertakings, they have been reinstated in a way that just decades ago would have seemed, folks, really unthinkable. At the head of the society, like we've said, and I want to repeat this again, this idea that the Black Pope has no power, Right now we have a black pope, which is the Jesuit general, and also a Jesuit pope. The full extent of his power and influence over the papacy, and the papacy today being controlled by a Jesuit, can be known to very few. But it is more than possible that often it exceeds the power of the Pope himself. So who is the power now? We got two black popes, right? One wearing white, one wearing black. Notorious in the past, these people were expelled from every country in Europe and banned from residence in England until 1902. Can you believe this? But they're here in America, right? The Jesuits have often been described as what? The secret army of the papacy. The preface to Edmund Paris's book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, includes a warning to the Church, which has been sounded many, many times in relation to the threat posed by the Counter-Reformation. And let me say this. I've been trying to get this story out for years, and, I really don't know anymore, because, look, you're going to get these followers that go listen to my show that love the Jesuits, and then they try to criticize the show, right? So they deeply love the Jesuits, but they act as if they don't. And then you get the real truth seekers who really know the truth and want to get it out, but it never seems to get anywhere, right? Never seems to go anywhere because they want to keep this message in the conspiracy realm. It's never going to get out to the mainstream. As far as it goes is this show and several others on the internet who are getting this message across. And if they can keep it there, they're happy. So, that's what you're up against. You're up against a mass media who will never allow their masters to be uncovered, right? Now, the Order of the Society of Jesus was founded, we talked about it many times, Ignatius Loyola, to secretly accomplish two major goals. And these goals are important because they haven't changed. The first was to obtain universal political power, okay? The second, to establish a universal church. So, do you think this has changed? While people live a generation, this passes from generation to generation. And that is why this organization is the wealthiest. That is why this organization is the most dangerous. And the way forward, apart from the Inquisition, was by infiltration and penetration into every section of life. So after the Inquisition was cutting heads off, now they've gone to infiltration and penetration into every section of life with the aim of enforcing the canons and doctrines and temporal power to the Pope. To that end, Jesuits went to work, secretly infiltrating Protestant groups here in America, all over Europe, including families, places of work, hospitals, schools, colleges. Today, the Jesuits have almost completed this mission. The Bible, folks, puts local church government into the hands of a godly pastor, but the effect of a Jesuit actively over the years has been to remove that power to the denominational headquarters, to temporalize the church, and to thus push Protestant denominations into the arms of the Vatican. And that's taken from who? Edmund Paris's book. And Reverend J.A. Wiley, in the History of Protestantism, described the Jesuits this way. There was no tongue they could not speak, and no creed they could not profess, and thus was no people among whom they might not sojourn, and no church whose membership they might not enter, and whose functions they might not discharge. They could execrate the Pope with the Lutheran and swear the Solemn League with anyone. The Order of Jesus is never more formidable than when it appears to be least so. It is when Jesuits are stripped of all external means of doing harm that they devise the vastest schemes and execute them with the most daring courage. In the History of the Jesuits, published in 1897, A. Niccolini revealed the 4 open classes of Jesuits and the 5th secret class, who, he says, by the confession of Father Polini, constitute the strength and power of the society. Nor does the agent of Rome, and above all the Jesuit, expound at once the whole system of his religion, such as it is. But with diabolical dexterity he first insinuates himself into the confidence of the man he has marked as a proselyte, captivates his benevolence by all sorts of arts, and then step by step leads him as a convert into the fold of modern Babylon. In 1551, the secret instructions sent from the Council of Trent to the Jesuits in Paris were intercepted on the person of Thomas Heath, who was a Jesuit professing the highest style of Puritanism. These instructions set forth the most effective way of undermining and destroying the Church of England. And folks, they're using this method today to destroy Protestantism. That's why you're seeing Protestantism not be what the Bible-believing Christians had thought it would be. It's much different now. Because Protestantism meant protesting the Antichrist Vatican as it states in the Bible. Now they don't do that. They don't do it at all. And here's what they said back then. Ye are not to preach all after one method, but observe the place wherein you come. If Lutheranism be prevalent, then preach Calvinism. If Calvinism, then Lutheranism. If in England, then either of them, or John Huss's opinions, Anabaptism, or any that are contrary to the Holy See or to St. Peter, by which your function will not be suspected, and yet you may still act on the interest of the Mother Church. There being, as the Council are agreed on, no better way to demolish the Church of England of heresy but by mixture of doctrines, and by adding of ceremonies more than at present permitted. And that was, Albert Close wrote that in Rome's Fight for the British Throne, the Wycliffe Press in London. Okay? So they're doing the same thing here. Now, according to the French writer Adolphe Michel, Voltaire estimated the number of books written about the Jesuits over the years. Now, this is incredible, because you would think, with all this written about them, that we would know about it here in America, but that shows you how they have taken this and wiped it away from history. There's been over 6,000 books at the end of the 18th century, written about their evil, written about their intrigue. In the 19th century, books and sermons countering the Jesuits and their activities were published in profusion, many. Nowadays, they are few and far between. It seems that innumerable such works have gone out of print, and disappeared from the bookshelves. In theological colleges and public libraries, it is now hard to find any history of the Jesuits beyond the beginning of the 17th century. Most books on the Counter-Reformation are written by Roman Catholics now, many by the Jesuits themselves. Given that the Society of Jesus today, possibly more than ever, is the leading wing of the Roman Church, and that can be proved, well, we have the Pope as a Jesuit, we have the Black Pope, Jesuit general as well. All of this needs an explanation. These books just don't disappear overnight by themselves. Protestant watchmen who've looked at this, but never you hear about it at all, believe that the Jesuits have accomplished a remarkable feat in a relatively short time span in ridding schools, universities, and theological colleges of almost all historical literature written from a Protestant viewpoint. So, when you say that they have rewritten history, it's not an exaggeration at all. And so that is why it's easy for them to take a message like this and say, it's not important. It's just somebody who hates Catholics. It's counter to the growth of America. Now, the one thing that Catholicism loves to do, they love to mix Catholicism with Christianity. But if you really look at it, Catholicism is not Christianity. And basically, it is much, much different. More resembles paganism than it does Christianity when you get down to all of these different, traditions and ceremonies and symbols. And I know all of them because I grew up as a Catholic kid, both grade school and high school. And I've seen the indoctrination, and it really never leaves you. And that's why it's really interesting that a lot of Catholics who really understand what I'm saying here understand that they have to change their belief system because it's ingrained in you as a child. Because one thing, and I'm going to get to this in the second half, education is the key to Jesuitism itself. Indoctrination and obedience. And it starts at a young age and continues. Think about this. Newt Gingrich, right? Speaker of the House. Remember Newt? He works closely with Trump. His wife is the ambassador to the Vatican. Ambassador to what? 100 acres. I mean, given to them by Mussolini, a dictator. You think they're up to no good? Of course. But they can't tell you because they hide behind the cloak of Jesus and hide behind the cloak of Rome. It's a great cover. That's why many priests have been used as spies. And you can't call it any other way. So we're going to get back to this indoctrination and obedience that's been told to many people. But isn't it amazing? All these 6,000 books and more somehow just disappeared. And you wonder, why? If they had nothing to hide, if they're such a benevolent open book organization following Jesus, everything should be an open book, right? But it's anything but. They are a closed book, and you better watch out what's inside those pages. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.